It is officially spooky season. Okay, we're getting close to Halloween and we're getting close to the NBA regular season kicking off as well. And that is exactly why I'm going to be talking about why I think the San Antonio Spurs are one of the scariest teams in the NBA going into this season. Now, am I saying they're going to be a finals contender? No. Am I saying they're going to be one of the best teams in the league? No. But I do think that they are going to be a very strong playoff level team who has a legitimate shot to make it to the second round, maybe, if all things go well. I think realistically they're a play-in team that could fight for a first round spot and maybe the 8th or 7th spot, but I do also see a world where they play so good together that they could make it to the second round as well. And if I sound crazy to you, just hear me out for the rest of the video. I have a few reasons why, and I think there are very valid reasons as well. And if you still disagree with me, you can call me a retard in the comment section below. But if you do agree with me, just watch it all the way through, hit the like button, it would mean the world to me, and without further ado, without running on too much, just get right into this video. My first reason would be the fact that their starting five is extremely young and extremely good as well, and I think they're just gonna be very young and hungry and ready to win, as a lot of these guys in the starting lineup have not experienced much success at all since being in the NBA, despite individually being very solid players. But I think this year they have all the tools necessarily to be a good starting five and one of the better ones in the NBA, and with how young they all are, I think they're gonna play extremely well, they're gonna get along together, and they're just gonna be an extremely hard team to beat when it comes to starting five versus starting five. The first player I want to get into is going to be Devin Vassell, and now Devin Vassell is probably one of the most underrated players in the entire NBA period. He is a two-way guard who just last year averaged 18 points per game, and he's probably going to be averaging 20 plus after this season, and he's just an extremely good offensive player, but he's also a very good defensive player due to his wingspan and being a little bit bigger as well for a shooting guard, and he's just all around extremely good. He's only 23 years old as well, and he just still has tons and tons of rooms to growth, and with already in year 3 averaging 18 points per game as their starting shooting guard last year, he's only going to get better and even more efficient with how much better they got throughout this offseason. And I just think overall the San Antonio Spurs are a very good team for having Devin Vassell, and they're going to have him for the long run, as they did just extend him as well this offseason. And a lot of people thought they overpaid for them, but in my opinion I think they got a bargain, because this kid is probably going to be a top 10 shooting guard one day in the NBA, and he's just an all-around extremely solid player and one of the better two-way guys in the entire NBA today at only 23 years old. And then the second guy I want to get to is going to be Keldon Johnson, who is 24 years old, and he is another very underrated guy. I mean, the San Antonio Spurs have a lot of underrated players because they haven't been very good in the past, but Keldon Johnson is a guy who can give you 20 plus points per game any given night. He's a solid rebounder. He's not a terrible defender, and he could get better on that end, don't get me wrong, but he's not terrible. And with him being a solid rebounder plus a very good offensive player, especially for the size he is and how versatile he can be, Keldon Johnson's just a guy that not a lot of people talk about, but any team would love to have on their roster, especially as their second option on their team. And Keldon Johnson, I just think, is going to probably make a little bit better of a name for himself now that they might have a better record going into this year. And then their last year's rookie in Jeremy Sochan, who is now only 20 years old, is an extremely good defender. He has tons of versatility because he's a very good athlete and he's very versatile as well, and he's just extremely good on the defensive side of the ball. And in my opinion, he's already ahead of where I projected him to be on the offensive end of the ball after his rookie season, and that should only improve and get more efficient with it being a little bit easier, and he's going to get a lot more one-on-one looks due to them adding someone like Victor Wembanyama on the team. I just think overall Sochan is going to even have a better year, and he's going to be extremely impactful, especially on that defensive end. And as he develops more of a three-point shot and just develops his overall offensive game, he's going to become more and more dangerous of a player. And like I said, he's only 20 years old, so he has an extremely long time to keep developing that side of the ball. And I just think overall, with him being a young, athletic, very hungry guy, loves to play defense, is going to be hustling all the time, is going to be a great player, like I said, that any team would love to have, good or bad. And I just think Sochan is going to be a key contributor to this team for a very long time. And now finally getting to the guy that everybody wants to talk about is going to be Victor Wembanyama. Now let's be honest, he is probably the main reason why I'm making this video. Wembanyama is a freak. Yes, he got off to a rough start in his first Summer League game, but then he dropped like 30 in his second Summer League game. And in the preseason, he has been absolutely balling. He is looking like the freak everybody knew he could be. The defense is insane. He's probably one of the highest two-way ceiling guys in NBA history at this point. He could legitimately one day average like 25 plus points per game while being a top 5 defender as well. Maybe even more points. You never know. Maybe he'll win a few Defensive Player of the Years as well. He is just an absolute freak. He's blocking very good NBA player shots, and he's just going to be a handful painful to deal with because I just don't know how you guard him, because there's barely anyone that's 7'4" with 8-foot wingspan that can even come close to guarding one of his jump shots. And then even on the defensive end, he can block your shot from so far away that, like, what the hell do you do with that? Like, on both sides, he can just completely take over a game, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see a few of those games like that from him this season. And with them already having an extremely solid young core and good players around him, it is going to make it that much harder to guard him, because it's not like you can triple team him or double team him, even though you might have to, because guys like Keldon Johnson and Devin Vassell will legitimately beat you on the offensive end by themselves as well, because of how good they are on the offensive side of the ball. So it's not like they don't have anybody on their team and you can just triple team Victor Wembanyama and no one else can do anything. They legitimately have guys that can beat you by themselves if you don't guard them correctly and you play off of them to help with Wembanyama. And then the last guy in their starting five is Zach Collins, who, although is by far the least exciting, is still only 25 years old. He's a very solid rebounder. He can floor space for the center position, and he's just another very big guy who can grab rebounds. And with him and Victor Wembanyama as their starting front court as two centers, basically, let's be honest here, their rebounding issues, which I'm going to touch on a little bit later, should be helped a ton by adding this big of a starting lineup. And although I am much higher on the San Antonio Spurs starting lineup than a lot of people, I can guarantee you I'm way higher on their bench than basically anyone else that isn't a Spurs fan, because I'm not a Spurs fan. I just like what they're doing over there. And the first guy off their bench that I really want to talk about is going to be Malachi Branham. Now, I know anyone that's not a Spurs fan or a draft fan like me knows who Branham is. Almost no one knows who that is, but he is actually an extremely good player, and as a rookie last year, legitimately averaged an efficient 10 points per game off their bench. And towards the end of the year, he looked like an absolute stud when he was getting extended minutes when they were kind of tanking for Wembanyama. He looked extremely good in those minutes that he was getting, and I think he projects to be an extremely good player going forward. And I can see him starting on a few different teams in the NBA that are kind of bad on the lower end of the league, that are young and just looking for young guys. I think Branham could legitimately start for a lot of those teams, and I think he could legitimately be an extremely good player, especially on the offensive end, coming off the bench for the San Antonio Spurs going forward. And he's only going to get better from what he was last year, which is an extremely well and solid player. And I just think he's going to continue to be a focal point for this bench for an extremely long time. And if Vassell or Keldon Johnson or Sochan go down, for him to be the first guy off your bench that's probably going to start for you is extremely good second option to be able to go to. And I just think overall, he's one of the more underrated rookies from last year, and he's probably going to continue to be one of the more underrated players in the league for an extremely long time. And then the second guy who is a new addition is going to be Cedi Osman. Now, Cedi Osman, although he's never going to be a stud, he's never going to be a star, obviously, he is just an overall solid guy who's going to do what he's told, and it's probably going to be Greg Popovich's favorite player, because he's going to do exactly what he's told. He's going to play his role to a perfect T, and he's just going to be able to do things for the team that not your stars don't usually want to do. He's going to do the little things. He can score when he needs to. He can play solid defense. He's going to be a smart player. He's not going to lose you the game, and you're not going to have tons of drop-off from a guy like Johnson to Cedi Osman. Now, obviously, offensively, you will, but on the defensive side of the ball and rebounding and from the little things perspective, you're not going to have a huge drop-off, and he's not going to be the reason you lose very many games, and that's exactly what you want from your seventh guy off your bench. And then even last year, their starting point guard, Tre Jones, has now probably been moved to their bench, and Tre Jones is one of the better playmaking point guards in the NBA. Now, he's not anything great or special, but as your backup point guard, basically now, for him to be your backup, that is extremely good. He's a very good passer. He can score when he absolutely needs to, and he's just overall an extremely solid player who any team would love to have as their backup point guard off their bench. And then their last guy on the bench that I think is worth talking about is Devontae Graham, who, although as a Pelicans fan, when he was our starting point guard, can be extremely inconsistent, there's also nights where he can be the spark plug and be the best offensive player on the court on any given night. Like, he can go for 30 any night, but he can also go for 3 on like 1 of 10 for shooting. So he can legitimately, as a bench player, be a spark plug that can win you a few games throughout an entire year. And he also kind of has a clutch gene. He hit like 3 game winners for the Pelicans when he was on our team. So, I mean, he does have that going for him as well. And now I don't think he's going to be in very many clutch moments on the Spurs team, but I do think he could probably win them a few games with just being a spark plug off the bench and probably dropping 15 or 20 points on 5 or 6 games this season, and that would probably be the reason they win a few games. And if your bench player that's probably your 8th or 9th guy off the bench is helping you win 3 or 4 games a year, you will take that from any 9th man off the bench. And then the last thing that I really want to touch on, now that I got kind of through all their individual players and how I think their roster as a whole is pretty underrated, I want to get into why I think they're going to be a lot better from what they were last year. And it's not going to be as simple as they added Victor Wembanyama, okay? I think that's pretty weak. Now, I do think he's a huge reason why a lot of these weaknesses have been addressed, but he's not the only reason. So what were their biggest weaknesses last year? Let's just throw out a few stats here. Last year, they were the 26th ranked teams in blocks per game. They were in the bottom half of the league in rebounds per game. They were the worst team when it came to opponents' points in the paints per game. They were once again the worst team in defensive efficiency, and they were the worst team in defensive points per game allowed, which is extremely, extremely bad, and no coach ever wants to see the defense legitimately being so bad that it loses you games on a very consistent basis, and that is exactly what the Spurs did. But now adding a guy that is 7'4" with an 8-foot wingspan, let's be honest, should help a lot with your blocks per game, a lot with the points in the paint per game, and then also a lot with the rebounds per game. And then with him also being one of the best defenders as a young guy in the league, it should also help a lot with your defensive efficiency. And the reason he is going to be so impactful is not just because of his individual impact, but the fact that Zach Collins is their starting center as well with him. That is 2 7-foot+ guys that are starting, which is going to help your rebounding a shit ton. It's going to help your points allowed in the paint per game a shit ton, and your rebounding and all that is going to help a lot as well. And then moving Jeremy Sochan to basically a small forward position, which he is a very big small forward who, although isn't great on offense, is a great defender. Their defense should be helped a lot just by Victor Wembanyama being on the court, because now you have Jeremy Sochan at small forward being able to help with rebounding, points in the paint, and they're just going to be a very big starting lineup, and I think that's going to help a lot on the defensive side of the ball, and it's also going to make them a handful to deal with on the offense side of the ball as well. I just think overall their weaknesses are going to be drastically improved from last year, and their strengths should only get stronger from what they were able to add as well. And I just think overall this team is going to be extremely, extremely solid, maybe a play-in level team, and I think a lot of people are kind of underrating them, and I think that they're an extremely scary team, especially going forward into the future, because I think guys like Vasil could be a star. I think Wembanyama is going to be a probably MVP level player one day. Keldon Johnson's an all-star level player. Sochan could be in all defensive teams one day, and just overall this starting lineup is extremely, extremely solid. They have a very bright future, same with their bench, and I just think overall with Greg Popovich leading them as well, this team is just going to be extremely, extremely good going in the future, and I just think overall are going to be extremely scary and very hard to beat when it comes down to it in big games going in a little bit later in this year. But unfortunately, guys, that's for this video. So comment below. Do you agree with me? Do you think the Spurs are terrifying? Do you think they're scary? I want your thoughts in the comment section below. And leave a point to the like button and subscribe button. Mean that absolute word to me. And hope you have a blessed day. Could I have a blessed day? So you need to have a blessed day. All glory to God. See you in the next video. Goodbye. Boom. Blah.